In a small Louisiana town lies a tale where heartaches are found. A cemetery with stories untold, but the gates are locked and truths on hold. Hear the whispers of the Delta breeze, hear the voices of the families please through the swamps and the muddy waters. They march together, sons and daughters.
Plantations and what has happened to us for generations. I don't know if he's noticed the cemetery inside of the plantation as we were passing.
Anybody who is a novice in property in Louisiana knows that you cannot block off access to somebody's property. This is absolutely ridiculous. So now they put up this sign. Again, after 9/11, this was just a gate that you just opened, and it was open every day. It was literally open every day. After they decided that they wanted to claim ownership of the cemetery, they did this to harass us. So now they want us to call them at this number to get into our cemetery where our dead people are buried. This is what they want to do.
Our story begins in the once quiet and historical town of Revilletown, Louisiana. Revilletown was formerly an African-American community with deep familial roots spanning generations. Founded in 1881 by former slaves, Revilletown was situated on the banks of the Mississippi River, approximately 20 miles south of Baton Rouge. It was once a tightly knit community where the cemetery stood as a sacred place, holding the memories and remains of ancestors. Families over multiple generations laid their loved ones to rest here, and every headstone and plot narrates a story from Revilletown's past. However, the lives of Revilletown's residents were shattered when Georgia Pacific, a large-scale chemical plant, opened just 1,000 feet away from this once serene community. Over the years, the residents became exposed to contaminated air and drinking water. Eventually, the chemical company bought out the residents in a lawsuit settlement, leaving behind only the Revilletown Cemetery. Now, the former residents find themselves in the battle of their lives as they take on the chemical giant, which is now attempting to claim ownership of their cemetery.
So Revilletown was founded in the 1800s by former enslaved persons. It was a two-street community. Most of us were either related by blood or by marriage. It was just a community, everything that you can think of that's good and positive in the world, in my eyesight, was Revilletown. It was the type of community where we played together, we worshiped together, we loved one another.
I was born in Revilletown, Louisiana. My father was the Reverend Eli Lewis Craig Sr., and my mother was Mary Camilla Molden Craig. They married in 1941. I was born in 1947, their third child. All of my dad's family were born in Revilletown, except for Robert Taylor. But Robert Taylor's daughter and my grandmother and my father and my siblings were born in Revilletown.
I spent a lot of time at my grandma's house. My grandma's house was on the main street of Revilletown. My mama's house was on McNeil Street, and my mama's house was on a piece of property that was purchased by her great-grandmother, Nancy Smith, who was a formerly enslaved person. And so we would go from literally riding bikes or walking from my mama's house to my grandma's house. My great-grandmother lived right down the street from my grandma. My parent and my nene, which are my godparents, lived across the street. My great uncle lived up the street.
So this is where the community of Revilletown was located. Where we are is actually on the street of Revilletown. And in between the streets of Revilletown and McNeil Street is where we are. So McNeil Street went all the way to the cemetery. This is how everyone got to the cemetery.
Or as a child, they always tease me because I can go back to when I was 4 years old. And as a child, pertaining to the cemetery, that was one of our playgrounds. We had an area, an empty lot in Revilletown where the kids would gather and play, and it was just called the lot. And our second place in Revilletown was the cemetery. We would go back there and play. And we had one grocery store, and that was owned by my great uncle Lemuel Smith. And we had the church that our great grandfather, the Reverend Robert Taylor, founded. And later, my father, who was his grandchild, became the pastor of Mount Zion. And my father pastored that church for over 40 years, or nearly 40 years. And later, my baby brother became the pastor of the church. And going back to the cemetery was just an adventure for us. We just loved going back there. We would walk down McNeil Street or run down McNeil Street to the cemetery. And during berry season, we would stop and pick berries off the fence. And the only thing we had in the community was the store, which had no name, but it was called a store. And we had the church and the cemetery.
So I don't remember a time when it wasn't there. What I do remember is there was a point in time where things just started to die. We lived in the country, so we were surrounded by the levee, which held back the Mississippi River on one side. We had sugarcane fields on the other side. We had a chemical plant on the other side of us, on the other side heading south. And so there came a point in time where everybody who was my grandmother's age kept gardens, and things just started to die. The grass started to die. The water, we got to a point where we could no longer drink water out of the tap. So we had to get a water service to come in. People started to have unexplained rashes on them. And so, again, that affected the quality of life.
Okay, I've lived in the Revilletown community all my life. And living next to a chemical plant hasn't been one of the most pleasurable things in life. Constant plague with pollution, noise. As a matter of fact, you can probably hear the noise now. Never knowing when something would discharge.
As industrialization took hold, societies witnessed the rise of factories and polluting industries. The quest for economic progress came hand in hand with the degradation of the environment. The placement of these hazardous facilities was not a careless act, but rather a deliberate choice. Areas predominantly inhabited by marginalized communities became the dumping grounds for toxic waste, contaminated water sources, and hazardous emissions. The consequences were devastating. Generations exposed to these environmental hazards faced higher rates of illnesses, reduced life expectancy, and an overall decline in quality of life. This was no accident, but a testament to the deep-rooted inequality ingrained within our societies.
I don't care when you drove into the community, there was always something you could smell. A lot of times the odors were confined to like the further part of the street. Sometimes it was the upper part of the street, but there was always something in the air. And as a matter of fact, friends of mine who've come down to visit me tell me like they can tell they're nearing my house by the scent.
We, as children, just had little common colds growing up. We never had any type of illnesses or diseases. Uh, but after the plant came there, Georgia Gulf, after they came, my brothers, let me go back, I had three brothers. My two younger brothers developed liver problems. They also had hepatitis. And later I was tested and I had hepatitis. We can only attribute that to the chemicals that we were inhaling because we never had any problems before that.
We didn't know what it was at the time, but there were white substances that would be pretty much covered in everything, from cars to the lawns. So it was again, we didn't know what it was that was being covered, but later it was determined to be polyvinyl chloride, PVC. And still to this day, we would go to the cemetery, and sometimes the cemetery, the flowers, because we get flowers, the silk flowers to put on the graves, are covered with that white substance, also PVC.
Living here not being able to breathe, when you're caught in a chlorine spill, you know, you're around here gasping for breath. And one would think with all the stuff going into the air, you know, we never had this before Georgia Gulf. So the air was always clean, always smelling an odor. So one would think if you're constantly smelling a foul odor, irrespective of the nature, one would have to assume that that odor is not healthy. And just knowing what they produce in the plant, you know, everybody know that chemicals produced almost any, like polyvinyl chloride, vinyl chloride, everybody know there are health hazards associated with the production of those chemicals.
We would go back there and we would notice this little white, it looked like dust or on the plants. We go backing up to plants. We tried to plant little trees back there, and every time we would go back, they would die. They were dead. Every time we would leave from back there, we had to shower or take a bath because of the chemicals that were on our clothes.
You wake up with the powdery substance on your car, and you know something about it is abnormal. And of course, when people keep telling you there isn't anything to worry about, quite naturally, any human being would automatically assume, you know, something is wrong. It's out of the ordinary. You know, people don't wake up with powdery substances on their car. People don't wake up in the middle of the night trying to breathe from a chlorine spill. People don't wake up seeing grass have turned brown from a chlorine spill. Something is wrong.
We all have some type of breathing issue. We don't know exactly, because there wasn't a long-term study done on any type of autoimmune diseases that may actually come up from that. But I remember when Oprah came into town, and she was talking about the Cancer Alley, and there were a lot of women who were around us who had suffered miscarriages, and they were looking at whether there was some type of connection between the chemical plants that were in the area and those individuals who had suffered miscarriages.
Almost daily on the cars, always white powdery substances. When chlorine spills occurred, plant life, vegetable life turned yellow.
Well, we really didn't know what was going on, but the water started being brown, and so we would start boiling water, and not being aware of the effects of a chemical plant on the community, we didn't know what was happening. You know, but we were subjected to that, and some of us developed rashes. what we thought were just allergies were not actual allergies. It wasn't until later that we found out that we were all suffering with the same problem, something we never experienced before the plant.
Well, let's face it, basically when nations become industrialized, we're looking at an improved lifestyle, improved life expectancy extended. That's not true. As you can look around here and see, this is still, or was still, a very poor community. So economically, who benefited, from industrialization? Certainly not the residents of the community. Certainly not with the pollution. The life expectancy would have improved, would have expanded. So who's benefiting? Should I want to die for somebody else to prosper? It's ludicrous to ask for me to say, yeah, no,
The air, soil, and water in Revilletown were found to contain toxic waste levels that exceeded the standards set by the Environmental Protection Agency. In 1988, residents filed a class action lawsuit against Georgia Gulf. The case was settled out of court, with Georgia Gulf purchasing all the homes and lots in Revilletown. The only property that was not purchased by Georgia Gulf was the Revilletown Cemetery.
So again, the quality of life has started to deteriorate, and of course, the health implications that were coming along with us being so close to that chemical company. And I talked about earlier, playing between, my mom and my grandmother and my great grandma's house. So there was literally a ditch that separated my great grandmother's house from the property of Georgia Gulf at the time. And so my mama, who I mentioned earlier, who again is my superhero, my warrior, my icon, she saw how it was affecting folks in the community. And so she, of course, the actual settlement is sealed, but the outcome of that suit was that some folks decided to swap out a house for a house. Others, such as my mama, my grandmother, my great grandma, uncles, my great uncle, Miss Christina, who was my great uncle's mother-in-law, all moved from Revilletown to Bruley because we built homes here in Bruley.
One of the things that you realize about industry is that I don't have to come in and tell you anything. It's kind of like cowboys and Indians, but I can make your life so miserable that you're going to do anything to get the hell on out of the area. I firmly believe had it been a white community, it never would have been put here. But of course, this was a poor, rural black community. And nobody cared. Nobody cared that I could stand in my grandmother's door and watch the activities going on at Georgia Gulf. That I could stand here and watch the police cars and the sirens going to Georgia Gulf. Nobody bothered. They figured when they built this plant, let's put it in Revilletown. We got a bunch of little black folk down there. Let's go on, and they're not going to worry about it because whatever's happening in Revilletown, it's going to be contained in Revilletown. It won't come to Plaquemine. And at that time, the Iberville Parish Police jury was all white. So who was there to look out for our interests? Nobody.
Well, when the relocation took place, I had married and moved away. But it was just a terrible time for Revilletown because we were scattered. We didn't know where to go. And let me just inject this about my dear cousin Janice Dickerson. She tried to get the community together to help them to move because we were forced to move. And so it was just a hard time. My parents, my father was deceased by that time, but my mom and my two brothers moved to Baton Rouge, and others were scattered. They still tried to congregate for church.
It was devastating to the community because you had people who had literally lived all their lives in this place. And again, the familiar environment of it, the tranquility of knowing that your neighbor was related to you, that you can leave your door open at night. If there was a strange car coming down the street, there was somebody who's going to notify you that a strange car was coming down the street. That was probably the biggest emotional impact that occurred, you know, from the settlement, that everybody had to scatter and leave, their home.
It was more like a giveaway than a buyout. I don't think the plant should have. We were here first. I don't think the plant should have been located here.
The impact of the settlement was profound. The close-knit community was torn apart. Families who had once shared laughter and cherished memories in Revilletown were now forced to scatter, seeking refuge from the poisoned environment they once called home. The collective bond forged over generations was abruptly severed.
I remember, waking up in the middle of the night and after we had moved, and then just crying and telling Mom I wanted to go home. So it was probably more emotional for older people than it was for me. But as a kid, in my head, I just wanted to go back home.
In 1884, Robert Taylor established the Mount Zion Baptist Association. This benevolent association acquired the land and developed the Revilletown Cemetery. The purpose of developing the Revilletown Cemetery was to create a burial site for residents and their descendants.
Like most Black communities that were located along the river, Black and white people could not be buried in the same cemetery. Even to this day, I think one of the most segregated places in America is still the church. And so what happened is benevolent societies were created in order to either create churches and or cemeteries. So Robert Taylor created one benevolent society in which he formed the Mount Zion Baptist Church of Revilletown. And then he created another entity, the Mount Zion Baptist Association, which bought the property for the cemetery. And so the cash sale document states that that cemetery was purchased for the exclusive use of Revilletown residents and its descendants. So unlike most of these communities, the church and cemetery in Revilletown have always been separate.
The cemetery held more significance for the families of Revilletown than just being a final resting place for their loved ones. It embodied a wealth of history and cherished traditions.
We would walk I would walk with my grandmother and, some of the other elders in the community. They would walk down to the cemetery, and my grandma would point out everywhere that our family was buried. Of course, we did this walk a lot, but we also, during holidays such as All Saints Day, birthdays, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Grandparents' Day, we would go to the cemetery and put flowers on the graves of our loved ones. And so being close to them, their resting place was a way for us to maintain that connection.
Everybody, you look at this, he was born in 1885 and died in 1954. So this is what I'm talking about, the history that we have. And I'm sorry, I see a plant that's down. I got to pick it up because that's just what we do. But this is all family right here. This is my great grandfather and my great uncle who are right here. So this is Joshua Little as a cousin. I mean, this is all family when we're talking about the mausoleum. when we were talking about the mausoleum, when Cousin V was talking about the mausoleum, this is her family's mausoleum. This is where her mother and her father and her brother is buried.
Robert Taylor was my father's great grandfather, and he was my great great grandfather. And the Reverend Robert Taylor, founded the Revilletown Cemetery. He purchased the Revilletown Cemetery for the residents of Revilletown so that they would have a burial place.
And so when we were relocated, Mount Zion Baptist Church #1, which was the church where the majority of Revilletown residents were went to church and worshiped, moved to the new Revilletown Park. And so that still left, of course, the cemetery, again, which was founded by the same person who founded the church, but under two different entities. So it was never a connection or ownership of the church, or the church having ownership of the cemetery, again, because Robert Taylor was very forward thinking. He probably knew that he wasn't always going to be the pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church #1. So he created one entity that created the church, and he created another entity that created the cemetery.
After settling with Georgia Gulf, the former residents of Revilletown enjoyed uninterrupted access to the cemetery for over 20 years. Nevertheless, this situation took a dramatic turn when Janice Dickerson confronted the Mount Zion Baptist Church of Revilletown Park regarding the imposition of burial fees on a former resident.
This church, Revilletown, Mount Zion Baptist Church of Revilletown Park, at some particular point in time, decided, or maybe they had been doing it before to certain people and we just didn't know, decided to charge a family $600 for burial. That family called my mama because my mama was a civil rights icon. She took up, the fight of people. So she called. By this time, my grandmother had passed away. She called people who were in her age group, and she asked, what's going on? Let's meet. Nobody is supposed to be charged in this, to be buried in this cemetery. Who is from Revilletown, is for Revilletown residents. My mama asked, if the church needed money, then she would be more than willing to give them money if they were hard up for some funds. There were only a couple of people who came to the meeting. And so at that particular point in time, unbeknownst to us, of course, because my mom was still trying to find out exactly what the issue was and why they were trying to, charge people the $600 to be buried in the church. Later on, we found out through the depositions and everything that came forward that at the time, my mama contacted the folks who were her age, who were from Revilletown, who still went to the church to find out what was going on. The pastor of the church at the time, George Barrett, and the secretary at the time, Sheila Montgomery, contacted the folks at the chemical plant, and this is the deposition of the plant manager from the chemical company, said that, well, we thought that you all had given us the cemetery in the buyout. And I'm paraphrasing from the deposition. But the plant manager in his deposition said that he didn't know anything about that. He looked in their records in Plaquemine. He looked in their records at their headquarters in Atlanta. He didn't see anything where they ever owned the cemetery. So he could not give anybody anything that they couldn't, that they didn't own, of course. And so what happened is, next was a land grab. And unfortunately, the pastor and the secretary weren't astute enough to realize that A, what they were doing, it holds no legal weight, but then B, that these people were now going to try to assume ownership of the cemetery. And so at that particular point in time, the chemical company got their attorneys to draw up an affidavit that said that the folks at the church recognized that the chemical company was the owner of the cemetery, and that the chemical company would then give the church use of the cemetery. And when I looked at that, and I laughed, because if we can just claim ownership of people's property without having any type of record, then surely I can go to my neighbor's house and, tell somebody I own my neighbor's house and then give them the right to use my neighbor's house. So that, again, unbeknownst to us, this is what was going on. But because nobody had gotten in contact. Well, there was like 4 or 5 people who came up. And so my mama met with them. They restarted the association. I filed a temporary restraining order against the church, asking them to stop charging. And bam, we got hit with an intervention, and the chemical plant came in and said that they were actually the owners of the cemetery, and they presented that affidavit. The church, again, which had no affiliation with the cemetery, based on the documents that are filed in the clerk of court in the parish of Iberville, never had ownership of the cemetery. The chemical company also never had ownership of the cemetery. And there's a cash sale document in the clerk of court in the parish of Iberville that shows that Robert Taylor purchased this piece of land for the exclusive use of Revilletown residents and its descendants to bury its people.
This is family. This is our history. This is important to us. This is important. I need to find a brick to lay this down, but I'm gonna get one and come back and do that. This is where my people are.
2009 is when it actually came to our attention that we had to have permission from Georgia Gulf to bury our loved ones back there. And before that time, when someone in the community died, my great uncle Thomas Wilson and Mr. Dave Wilson would go back there, and a representative from the family would go and select a spot for the person to be buried. That's all we had to do. And then I think it was in I don't have the year, but Mount Zion, the church that I spoke of, that my father and brother pastored, they never charged members of residents to be buried back there. So the church started charging. First started at $350, I think, and then they went to $600 charging. I'll tell you about an incident when my grandmother died. My grandmother had been a member of that church for about 40 years, moved her membership, and when she died, they called and said that she had to, in order for her to be buried back there, we had to pay. And so they said if we didn't pay, she would be left on the headland. It's the little area that leads into the cemetery is just a little narrow path. So we didn't. My brother said that we weren't going to pay, and so my uncle paid Mount Zion for his mother to be buried back there. And while I'm talking about that, when my mother died in 2014, who was a member of the organization, the Mount Zion Association, who worked diligently along with the others trying to get this settled with the plant. When she died, I was on my way to the next day to the mortuary, I'm sorry. And I got a call from a member from Revilletown that was a member of Mount Zion saying, "Oh, I'm calling to offer my sympathy, but we saw in the paper that your mom is scheduled to be buried in Mount Zion Cemetery." I said, "Yes." "Well, you're going to have to bring me $600 in order for her to be buried in the cemetery." I said, "No, I'm not doing that. And she will be buried in the cemetery." My cousin Janice had to get an injunction for my mother to be buried back there, who had been a member of that church for over 40 years, who is, this is so disheartening. But we didn't, bottom line is we didn't pay, but they had the audacity to send me a letter with a receipt. This is from Mount Zion Baptist Church, saying that Georgia, by then it was a different name of the company, but that they had sent them a check for my mother to be buried back there. Take note, my mother had her burial spot. My father, mother, brothers, and later my uncle and aunt, my grandparents, are buried back there in what we call our mausoleum. Okay? So my mother already had a space there. We didn't have to dig a hole for her to be buried in. Okay? This dates back to when my youngest brother, who later became a pastor, when he was 12 years old, he started playing for churches. And he and I always didn't like the idea that our brother was buried in the ground, our oldest brother. And so when he got his first paycheck, he had a foundation laid to cover where my brother was buried. And from there, he and my mother continued to build on to that spot. And so we didn't have to go in the ground. But yet they wanted to charge us to be buried back there. So it's been very, very traumatic. It's been a fight. And I'm in here for the fight till the end. I haven't been back to the cemetery since Janice was buried December 18, 2021. And it hurts that I can't go back there. Well, I'm not going to call them anymore and ask them permission to go in that cemetery. It hurts. It's a pain. It really is.
That church accepted $600 from this.
Yes.
In order for you to bury in your own.
Yeah.
That is atrocious.
I told you didn't hear me. That's what they've been doing. The church been illegally. They signed a document saying Georgia go on the cemetery. Wasn't no church when they signed that, and they agreed to make them their agents, so they give them charge people $600 a bury.
It's very intrusive. It's very demeaning. I mean, as you could tell on the phone, the security guards have, not all of them, but some of them have nasty attitudes. One of them hung up in the one that I called today, she hung up in my face when I just asked her how long it was going to be. And I doubt if she was going to visit, but maybe she's not somebody who had people who loved her. And I have to reckon with that not everybody has somebody in their life who loved them enough for them to want to come and pay their respects for them after they die. So she could be one of those people who was never shown love, who never had love, who never had people to pour into her.
Yes, so of course, now we were in this um, adversarial battle with the chemical company, again, who was using the church uh, to try to claim ownership of the Revilletown Cemetery. And of course, because now we're dealing with a chemical company, we're dealing with white people who don't understand that this is our family. This is serious to us. This is what we've always, done. As I mentioned before, we were at the cemetery a lot. We went for birthdays and holidays and Mother's Day and Father's Day and All Saints Day and Grandparents' Day. And if we just felt like going to the cemetery because we wanted to commune with our loved ones. And so after we filed the temporary restraining order against the church and the chemical company intervened, the chemical company decided that this was some type of game, again, because this is land to them. And if people don't respect Black lives while they're living, I know that they did not respect, bodies of dead Black people. And so when we would go back to take the flowers to the graves, we got police officers called on us, saying that we were trespassing at our cemetery. The Iberville Parish Sheriff's Department, who were the cousins of the sheriff, who was a cousin of the attorney for the chemical plant. He sent the sheriff's officers back there, threatening to arrest us. They had also put up an electronic gate. And just so for context, about 2011, 2012, as I said earlier, once the public road was covered up by the chemical plant, we would then have to go down Evergreen Road and cross over the chemical plant's property in order to get to the cemetery. Again, prior to the chemical plant being there, everybody went down McNeil Street straight into the cemetery. After the chemical plant, because they commandeered a public road, we had to go down Evergreen, go across their property, and go into the cemetery. When they put up the original fence, even prior to, everything, this was 2000, when was 9/11 was 2001. So it must have been 2002, I'm sorry, 2002, 2003, when they put up this outer fence because of 9/11. That fence always stayed open. Whoever, was manning the gate, I don't know if it was their security, the gate going into their property was always open. It was open in the morning. There was never any type of restriction. No one had to be called to open up a gate or anything. After the institution of the suit in the chemical plant intervening, claiming ownership, they put up a gate, and they put a padlock on the gate, and they put a sign on the gate that now said we had to call them to get into the gate. Again, this is one of those tactics. This is them playing games with the people who I love, who are buried back there in Revilletown. And so they put up, they padlocked it, and so they would call the police, going back to calling the police, saying that we were trespassing, that we were trying to get into the cemetery. They would call our attorney and say they're at it again, and they're trying to get into the cemetery. And mind you, we weren't going back there every day. We were going back there how we always and customarily have gone to the cemetery. And so it became this antagonizing thing that was a concerted effort, between the chemical company, their attorneys, and really some of the elected officials, that were down in Iberville Parish.
And the police are always going to be there trying to stop us and everything else that go with it. We get used to it and we do what we have to do. This is no different.
Amen. All right. What they're doing, that was the head of security. And of course, they probably saw us in the actual Revilletown. And so now he's going to quote unquote get the key. This is what they do in order to harass.
After the former residents of Revilletown initiated their lawsuit, the chemical plant decided to install locks on the gates and restrict access to the cemetery. Consequently, family members are now required to call a phone number in order to gain entry to the cemetery. Unfortunately, they sometimes find themselves waiting for hours until security finally grants them access.
We are an extension of our ancestors. I just was hoping that maybe you could talk a little bit about, I don't know, I've been struggling with the difference between hope and faith. And sometimes I feel like hope is fleeting, but faith is everlasting.
Amen.
And the people here, we have faith.
Yes.
And it's so important that we gather because we give the courage and the faith to other people to keep doing this.
But what I can say is that they made it a very, very hard and harrowing experience. Something that was already hard enough to go to sit down just to be able to be in a space with the body of people who you love, people who played significant roles in your life. And this is the place where you can go and you can connect with them. And to have police called, or when they lock the gate, to have to sit out sometimes for an hour and a half or 2 hours before they came and opened up the gate to their property, which was basically a servitude. Their property is basically a servitude to the cemetery. And so it was just, it was emotionally draining. It again caused some people, it didn't deter us, but it did deter some people who would try to go back and visit their loved ones from visiting them, because again, if now they put this lock on the gate that had been there since after 9/11, that was always open, and now they're trying to restrict access to the servitude to get to the cemetery, and they don't come, or they call the police, or they don't come for an hour and a half, 2 hours. It just became a very, very trying and emotionally taxing experience. There were times when people never came, and my mama and cousin V, Vivian Shafee, would go and they would try to put flowers on the graves. We have flowers that have died because we weren't able to put them back there because they were trying to restrict access. It just became very, very emotionally taxing and laborious to continue something that had been going on all of my life, and had been going on all of my mama's life, and had been going on all of my grandmother's life, and had been going all of my great grandmother's life. To try to do something that we have traditionally and customarily always done.
This monstrosity, look. And they put fences around our ancestral grounds.
Exactly. Who was here first?
Who was here? Who paid the price for this? She held up the legal title deed that there, and we bought this property. In America, we had the right to do that unless.
So normally what we would do is we open up both of these gates when we want to drive back in, because of course it is wide enough for a car. Also, when there's a burial that goes on, the grave digger comes back here. It's been freshly cut. Ricky came out and cut the grass today.
We're the people in this country, in this state, why aren't there 100,000 decent people out here, black, white, and white? Where are the people? We must resist this type of oppression.
They would like to bulldoze that cemetery so that they can have that space for them. They have no respect for our loved ones. Why do you think they would want to say they maintain the cemetery? They don't. Marla and her sisters are continuing to maintain the cemetery. Before cousin Janice passed, she paid to have that cemetery maintained as far as keeping the grass cut, making sure that the tombs were intact. It's just they want the cemetery because, like I said, they want to expand, and the only way they can expand is take that little spot that we have.
Are we afraid to stand up
Yes.
to those among us who betray us to these people? And they're betraying us for peanuts.
Right.
What are they giving them? Millions? These people are trillionaires. They come in and they find a few weak people in our community, and we lay back and let those people send us to hell. How can they stomp on all of this history here? I think it's outrageous.
It is.
If you notice where we are, chemical plant abuts us right next door. The chemical plant can't grow unless they grow toward the road. And so right now we are standing in a blockade. Again, I ask why. Why are they even trying to claim ownership of a cemetery? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So what is the why? The only why I can see is that if we stop fighting, just like it was so hard for us to get in here just now, they're going to block access. They're going to bulldoze this.
In December 2021, Marla's mother passed away. Alongside grappling with the profound sorrow of losing her mom, Marla also bore the responsibility of ensuring her mother's final resting place was in the Revilletown cemetery, where all of their loved ones rest eternally.
Well, no one should have to go through what they went through to try to get their mother buried back there. Janice was a warrior. She was a fighter. She not only wanted to fight for her immediate family, but she wanted to fight for the entire community. And to know that she took her money, didn't ask anybody for money, to fight this, starting with the local government, the local court, trying to get justice for the descendants of Revilletown.
Negroes are so scared in this parish. There are people, and I'm telling you like it is, there are people buried in here. They say, Janice, you can't fight no plant. You ain't got enough money to fight no plant. I say, but I got something greater than money. It's called God, and we're going to take care of this plant. Amen.
We were at the appellate court again. Because again, even though the first time we were at the appellate court, they reversed the ruling of the judge. We got a new judge, Kimball. And this is the problem with having elected judges. I don't know if they sit in a position where they were the best attorneys, but because of popularity, they were elected judges. But he ruled in favor of the court, in favor of the chemical company again. We were in the middle of going back to the First Circuit, and Mama got sick. And so she ultimately passed away on December 8th, 2021. And in the midst of dealing with this death, which was a surprise to us, and trying to grieve, we were once again faced with whether we would be able to bury my mother, who had been fighting this since 2009, with every fiber of her being.
In the cemetery, of course, I was of the decision already that regardless of what was going on, she was going to be buried next to her mother and her father and her brother. And so our attorney, Christopher Meeks, he was back and forth with the attorneys at the chemical company again, who have to be vile individuals. Uh, because I'm still not understanding why. There's no why behind this. Going back and forth with them, the Attorney General's office for the state of Louisiana, who at this particular point in time had also gotten involved with this, to have my mama buried next to her family. And of course, while we are again trying to grieve, and grieving is something that is an ongoing process, I still grieve to this day because she was my best friend. The fact that we had to continue this fight and then ultimately make a decision to dismiss the case at the appellate level in order for the state of Louisiana, through the Attorney General's office, to have her buried back there, is how she was able to be buried beside my grandma and my grandpa and my Uncle Horace. And so that's how she was able to be buried, only through those means. And again, it was a trying time, because again, having to deal with the death of our mother, who again was made us believe in superheroes, and was literally everything to us. Having to go through that was literally hell on earth.
If you listen closely, you can hear my soul cry. Someone should have told me only angels can fly. The sky's the limit. Wish I could pay you a visit. It's your voice that I'm missing. Not seeing your face got me tripping.
And today, this is how they continue to repay us. By bulldozing our ancestry, by stomping on us today, like this guy in Baton Rouge threatened to put people who are simply protesting the injustice being done to them. He got the audacity to threaten us with 15 years imprisonment. He want to make felons out of these people? What is going on? My God.
So literally, on December 8th, when she passed, at 12:01 in the morning, I started texting the attorney. When she fell ill, I was talking to him that entire time and telling him, as her condition ebbed and flowed, um, about what was going on with her. And literally, from the time that she passed at 12:01 on December 8th, and for about a week thereafter, um, that's how long it took us to um, get everything situated. So again, when I tell you the grief and having to deal with someone passing away who meant everything to me in this world, and having to struggle with that at the same time, is making sure that her final resting place was going to be there, in Revilletown Cemetery. No one should ever have to go through that, ever, because a chemical company is greedy, who has nothing in the records. Again, I say it again and again and again. They have nothing in the parish of Iberville in their clerk of court. They have nothing according to their own plant manager. that said that they ever owned the Revilletown Cemetery. And for them to continue to claim anything pertaining to that cemetery is absolutely abhorrent. It is the most disgusting and vile thing.
Father God, as we prepare to leave this place, this holy ground, Father God, we ask that the spirits remain with us, Father God. For we have taken that opportunity that you have given us, Father. You have opened these here roads to us, Father God, no matter what obstacles may come our way.
Like an unrelenting river, the opening of the chemical plant and the environmental contamination leveled onto the community carved a different path for this once quaint community. Today, the fabric of family and heritage that was once Revilletown exists only in the minds and hearts of those who remember. Silence has replaced the once lively banter that brokered friendships and kinships. The community of Revilletown has been erased from the map, its history archived in the sepia tones of old photographs and within the whispering memories of the former residents. Yet its legacy persists, a distant memory to the families once rooted there, a silent testament to the bittersweet passage of time. Now, the former residents must continue the fight to save the only thing they have left in Revilletown, the cemetery, where their ancestors now rest eternally.
I think the height of awareness about pollution issues or about the environment haven't really struck home with a lot of Blacks. And I think Revilletown might be a focal point for a lot of people to start looking at and begin to realize what can happen to our history. I mean, we lost our history once when we were shipped to America. And here we are, we've been settled here for hundreds of years, well, at least 100 years, and we're uprooted again. And we're uprooted basically the same culprit, white American capitalist. So the cycle has to stop. Somebody needs to develop an interest.
I mean, when you think about historically what people have had to fight for, nothing has been easy. We can't be afraid simply because there is a international conglomerate that's on the other side. If that was the case, then we wouldn't have the advances that we have. I mean, and you have to stand on something.
If you listen closely, you can hear my soul cry. Someone should have told me only angels can fly. The sky's the limit. Wish I could pay you a visit. It's your voice that I'm missing. Not seeing your face got me tripping.
I swear I miss my grandma and tell me like fuck cancer. Man, I'm in my thoughts, she really breaking me down. I guess we never figure out why we go through pain. I feel myself with all these drugs, I'm trying to wash it away. I took so many losses, I don't charge into the game. I never speak on what we did, never do shit for no fame. Most these niggas hating in they lane. I swear I never change on my games on the game.
If you listen closely, you can hear my soul cry. Someone should have told me only angels can fly. The sky's the limit. Wish I could pay you a visit. It's your voice that I'm missing. Not seeing your face got me